Hi, I'm Alex Fayborg, and I'm a designer working on the user experience of Firefox. In this video, we'll be discussing tab position. Essentially, should tabs remain in their current position in Firefox, or should we change the default to be placing tabs on top?
In case the example with file folders wasn't very clear, here are some mock-ups of what I'm talking about. I should note that everything in this video consists purely of mock-ups. None of this has been fully implemented yet. And first we see tabs on bottom. This is a configuration used by the browsers Internet Explorer and Safari. And transitioning, here we see tabs placed on top, and a lot of you will note that this is a configuration that's been used by both Opera and Chrome. Contributors who are active in the Mozilla community will note this debate goes back for literally years, so in some respects this video will serve as a quick summary of all of the different arguments both for and against the change. But the more interesting part isn't about looking back, it's about looking forward. Recently modern browsers have been transitioning to placing tabs on top. And that decision isn't arbitrary, it isn't about fashion. The change to placing tabs on top isn't about one browser versus another browser, it's about the evolution of the web as a platform. But before I go into the specific reasons, I have to make it really absolutely, perfectly, completely clear that what we're debating is the default preference. As always, users have complete control over customizing Firefox, so it's exactly the way that they like. So the question being debated here isn't really necessarily what makes sense for you personally, but how Firefox should behave right after a fresh install. There are 4 distinct reasons why we feel tabs on top is a better interface, and we'll be going through each of those specifically. The first one's the conceptual model. To help visualize this, let's render all of the controls that are related to the browser window in purple, and all the controls that are related to the particular tab in green. So here we see the color coding applied to the layout of having tabs on bottom. What's bad about this layout is that many of the controls are visually disjointed and incorrectly grouped. For instance, the back and forward buttons control the state of the focus tab, but visually they look like they would help the user navigate between selected tabs, because these controls are placed on the purple browser level and not inside of the tab itself. Also, some controls are a little ambiguous. The Google search field, for instance, will affect the state of the active tab, but it also maintains its own state regardless of which tab is selected. This is inconsistent with the location bar, which always displays the location of the active tab. If we transition to a layout of tabs on top, this results in visually grouping all of the controls with the surface of the application that they will affect. It's now visually self-describing that the back and forward buttons are going to affect the state of the active tab, and a user can actually draw this conclusion before they even interact with the browser for the first time. Also, this layout assumes that the Google search field doesn't maintain state between tabs for internal interactive consistency. The next consideration is a new feature of Firefox 4 called App Tabs. App tabs are small, persistent tabs placed on the left side of the tab strip that are useful for applications you'd like to leave open. A number of Firefox extensions have been doing this over the years, and it's really useful because they take less space, you can't close them accidentally, and your applications and documents aren't mixed together. Here we see that the users created an app tab for Pandora, as well as a few other frequently used applications. Because app tabs are fixed to a particular application, it isn't really clear what we should do with the location bar and search bar. We don't want to allow the user to accidentally navigate their app tab somewhere else, so we could disable these controls. Unfortunately, that wastes a lot of screen space for controls that have no function. Alternatively, we could have the navigation and searches open in a new tab instead of replacing the app tab, but that's a really inconsistent behavior from how normal tabs function. Another consideration is that a new feature in HTML5 allows web applications to start to expose their own native menus and toolbars. This is a really exciting feature for the platform of the web and for the future of rich HTML5 applications. But when you start to layer all of the browser's interface along with all of the application's interface, things start to get kind of unwieldy. With tabs on top, this is no longer an issue because app tabs have full control. Okay, now I know this is ridiculous, but let's imagine that client-side Windows applications had a location bar. And this location bar didn't really have any other purpose other than displaying what executable file you had invoked. Pretty soon people would realize this isn't really necessary. The third consideration is similar to app tabs, but has to do with Firefox's secondary interfaces. We'd like to move to a model of placing our secondary windows, like the Add-ons Manager, Firefox Preferences, and the Library window shown here, into tabs instead of windows. This helps to group Firefox's interface together into a single cohesive application, but this change is also really important going forward for maintaining a consistent experience with other platforms that actually might not have a window manager, or it might not even be clear what operating system is running on the device. The fourth consideration is the panel-based notification system we are designing for Firefox 4. Here we see an example of one of these notifications, and this example is HTTP authentication, but we're also going to be using these for things like geolocation, local storage, password manager, basically any situation where the website is producing a question. Because these questions are coming from the website, we want to make that very literal in the visual design, as the site identity block almost has a cartoon-style dialog bubble addressing the user. There are also a few additional reasons why we think this design is superior to the previous notification bars. First, these panels are easy to notice. We're actually designing the icons to make sure that they're viewable from the user's low-resolution peripheral vision. Second, these panels are really easy to dismiss and ignore. You can just click outside to close them and move on. Third, this interface always supports undo. If you accidentally closed a panel, you can always click on the part of the UI that created it to get it back. This is particularly important if you've actually changed your mind. And finally, these panels are tab modal, which is where tabs on top comes into play. If tabs aren't on top, we can still give these panels a mapping to the site identity block that is producing them, but at the cost of overlapping the tab strip. The panels can still be tab modal, but they're kind of pseudo-application modal, and they might be physically overlapping the tab that you'd like to access, so you need to dismiss the panel before switching tabs. There's one obvious downside to placing tabs on top, and that's mouse distance. If we move the tab strip farther away from the content of the page, you have to mouse slightly farther in order to switch tabs. This is something that we're interested in studying with the feedback program in the Firefox 4 betas based on Mozilla Labs test pilot. Also, it's worth noting that mouse efficiency is a bit more complex than pure distance. If we move the tabs all the way to the top when the window is maximized, we pick up the screen edge. In this configuration, the tabs are in fact much easier to target because the target surface includes an infinite space beyond the computer monitor. Of course, not everyone runs in maximized window mode, so it isn't immediately obvious if tab position creates a net win or a net loss of efficiency, and how sizable the win or loss actually is. This is, however, something that we could determine using test pilot. So to review, there are 4 specific reasons that we believe tabs on top is the ideal interface. First, we believe that it's important that the application visually represents the way that it behaves. It needs to be obvious which controls apply to different parts of the application. Secondly, app tabs in HTML5 are poised to create a rich new world of online applications. These applications deserve to produce their own UI and not be trapped inside of the traditional browser interface. Third, we would like to place Firefox's secondary windows inside of tabs for consistency with Firefox running on platforms that don't have a window manager, or tablets where window management doesn't make sense. And fourth, tabs on top allows us to create a new tab modal notification system that directly associates the notifications with the site's identity. But finally, there's one potential downside, and that's mouse distance and efficiency. We need to study that more, but nonetheless, we feel that the positive attributes of this design likely outweigh the negatives, and designing interfaces is often about correctly balancing trade-offs. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoy using this interface in the upcoming Firefox 4 betas, and as always, please send in your feedback.